I began to realize as I was preparing for this evening that it's this 1.5 hour time is worth about all fall and all spring. You know, it's enormous. Even if you don't know that because you never got any of the notes. So we'll hit some highlights and we'll carry over until next time anyway because there's so much about intimacy, gender, sexuality, a few small topics like that. I thought maybe a useful place to begin would be to allow you to take a look at a small, about 7-minute sort of interview with a young man. And without any build-up, you'll see what this is. I will tell you that it was done in a series of many young men and women. And I'm not sure all of the background, but it came out of a curiosity about style and what's underneath. But you'll see that this young man embodies so many elements of the things that we're studying. He speaks even more rapidly than I do, which is a problem, with a little bit of a dialect, so hang in and get your ears tuned up, and we'll see if it works. Then, what I would like for you to do when you finish is spend a little time seeing just what is your response, what's your reaction, what comes up in response to this young man's presentation. So let's see if we're still on. It should be just play, right? Should be. Are watching this a second time, or for the first time, that we're not here. We watched the link of the small piece by Sean Ross, which I just sent you all, by the way, with the proper list, I think.
Sean Ross.
And I sent you both of the handouts. Good. So hopefully you'll have all of those. And then for those of you that weren't in the room, what we did after watching the video is just notice what came up in response to watching this segment of both literal and kind of figurative revealing oneself. And then I ask all of you to begin to, in some ways, strip and to speak, just a little, and even offer some prompts, which I will send you, so you have those prompts. And so now I'm curious if anybody has anything they would like to say in response to what all of you just did together. And if it would be nice if you come up here and say it, because everybody that is going to watch could later on could hear what you're saying. So it's it's putting you on the stool in front of the brick wall, just a tiny bit, but you don't have to take your clothes off. Unless you feel so inclined. No, you can turn that off. Unless you want to watch it again. You can turn it back on. You'll get the link. There's another one I might show you at the very end if we have time of a young woman who's transgender. Kind of interesting. Someone come talk to me. Or talk to our group. What was curious? What was interesting? What was unexpected? What was baffling? What was irritating? Anybody have anything to say? Was it a waste of time? Was it a waste of time? Oh no.
Yeah. For me, I'm noticing something really shockingly positive.
Not that.
I think because of the work that just the holding that the Sangha has done for me over the past few years, you and Peg and Pesh, all of you, I noticed how the barrier to receiving nourishment feels so much thinner now. I can still see it in some of the prompts. You know, it's like pointing a little bit at this old pattern that just feels like a faint whisper today.
You can recognize it, but you don't feel yourself living in it quite so much.
Yeah, and it's shocking.
It looks like it's a bit delightful.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. Great. Did you identify with anything in this person who in some ways seems very different than most of us? Who's an albino, who's black, who's gay, who's in a different culture? Is there anything that you identify with?
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like I look different like that on the outside, but I have a part in me that has always felt very alien or foreign, or, you know, outside of my family, completely different than my family. So that I noticed right away. And I felt embraced by his comment about just love fully, just risk it all.
Yeah, it's interesting I mean, he's young, you can see the struggles and all that, and yet there's quite a bit. There's so many areas that were touched so beautifully in such a young person. There was a poem that we used actually in another class, but I started the notes with it. And so I want to read it again. It's from Hafiz, since my voice is not so great. Now that what you just said. Right.
How does it feel to be a heart? Once a young woman asked me, how does it feel to be a man? And I replied, my dear, I'm not sure. Then she said, well, aren't you a man? And this time I replied, I view gender as a beautiful animal that people take out for a walk on a leash and might enter in some odd contest to try to win strange prizes. My dear, a better question for Hafiz would have been, how does it feel to be a heart? For all I know is love, and I find my heart infinite and everywhere.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah, like that.
Anything else? Okay. Anyone else? You have such richness. I didn't get to be in any of the groups. I know you must have talked about something interesting or dear. And if you don't want to come up here, let yourself think about what's the hesitation. What's the fear? Betty's trying to get up.
Got this
Machine.
it's a stimuli. It makes me,
Not me in pain so much.
yeah, right.
Maybe you come this way so much you're not, you're in the camera.
Yeah, I was thinking of my best friend from elementary, junior high school, and a year in college. And she got really upset with me in our freshman year at FSU. And it was, at least it seemed like when I would go out with somebody and then come back and she'd be kind of pissed off and what's going on? Well, turns out after all these years that she loves women.
Well, she had a crush on you.
Well, I guess so.
She
But
didn't want you going out with other people.
I didn't understand. You know, I just said, why is she mad at me? And just going out, and it took like years until I kind of started thinking about it, like, what's going on? And then, you know, slowly, you know, started understanding. And, you know, she's still my best friend.
That's the best part.
Yeah, I mean, it is.
Sometimes it takes a long time to sort things out.
Well, growing up is hard to do.
Do you remember the story I told one time about it's a story from Tassajara with Suzuki Roshi, and it was in the summer practice period when guests were coming, and they were having a meeting, because when you're there in the summers, I've been there, you're staff, and so you're serving all of the guests who come during the summer for all the workshops, and you serve them food, and you take care of the cabins, and you're basically like a resort staff, because people are coming and paying a good amount of money to be there because it supports the monastery. And one of the young men said to Suzuki Roshi, you know, I've been practicing 5 years, on, and I've done all this, and you know, I still get really irritated with the guests. And Suzuki Roshi said, very strongly, 5 years is nothing. You have no idea how long it takes to learn, to love some people. And sometimes I think we underestimate how long it takes, sometimes a lifetime of struggle, all that, to understand each other, and to come to terms with each other, to forgive each other, and to forgive ourselves, and to love each other. So thanks for that story.
Thank you.
But I love that line. You have no idea how long it takes to learn to love some people. It was an option of not loving. You know.
Brave I am.
Please.
So brave. Feels brave.
So something that I noticed, I'm feeling like Rupesh is going to do a Hakomi on me. So I'm like,
No, I
He's been doing a lot longer.
I just came from a retreat in Hawaii, and one of the people who was there, who's not usually in the workshop, he's a great guy, he's on the board with me, and he said, I won't be so afraid to ask the Zen guy a question, you know, because he's like gonna turn it around, I'm gonna have like another question. And I said, if you're lucky. And he said, see?
yeah. It's true. So something I noticed, and I was talking about with our group, was that actually would have been fairly okay with me, with a cameraman and a stranger asking me the questions. But if I put my parents in the room holding the camera and asking me the questions, there's no way I would ever do that. And it was, I mean,
Anybody else think the
yeah.
same thing? Well, sure. That'd be a challenge, wouldn't it?
Oh, and I mean, I'm about to see them in 2 weeks, and it's always this just dread and fear that comes over me. You know, this,
How were you born?
how was I born?
How did you end up being conceived?
Oh, by the union of these two people?
They had sex.
No, it's
The form of
immaculate
Catholic.
conception.
Yeah, no, they actually had sex.
Mhm.
Yeah, naked probably. With each other.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. It would be very interesting to ask them, you know, like after all these years, what's your intimate life been like? You don't tell me detail, well, like what's it like? I'm not suggesting you have to do it, just the thought
Yeah.
is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
As if they actually, like if they were in this room, for example, watching these and being in these conversations, what would they say? How would they be? Who knows?
Oh, I mean, I can picture my father. You know, he would just hide in a corner.
And so then,
Flee.
how would you be compassionately respectful for the one who's hiding because the mask is difficulty of expressing, you know, the prompts? He would be responding to the prompts.
Mm-hmm.
Those would be the probes,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and you would see where the barriers are. And then to have compassion for that. These are incredibly powerful issues. This isn't ordinary stuff. That's why I thought this was a particularly interesting little video, not because it's like exemplary of anything particular, but there's so many elements to it, and that one would do it as they also took their clothes off, in not any lurid way, but just we're more exposed, you know. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? As a psychologist in couples and sex therapy training, in the couples enrichment work we did, one of the exercises we had couples do is we have them in the privacy of their own room, of course nobody was there. We would give them exercises. One of the exercises was to stand in front of a full-length mirror, completely naked. One person would, and then their spouse would just sit there. Then the person in front of the mirror would start and touch and go over their entire body slowly and talk about what they liked and what they didn't like, what they loved and what they hated, what they didn't want to look at. And then, without conversation, the next person would stand up and they would just watch.
Powerful.
Really, really powerful. Just to look and to hear and to really know how the other person experiences their own body, that you're going to love, that you're going to explore. Did some of you get the notes? And so what did you think about the pussy grabbing koan?
Oh, yeah, I didn't get that far.
I thought it was interesting that our friend Hsin Hsin Ming, she went ahead and used the Donald Trump thing to talk about a girl koan. You'll see it in your notes.
You can add some.
But is it okay if I read it? Just the first part of it. There's, you want to go sit down?
No, do you want me to?
No. You might help me read since I'm in trouble with my voice.
I think so.
What's that?
Okay.
Someone else will.
Yeah. Be that will be.
Yeah, okay, this is
Oh, yeah, this is.
because it's kind of strange. Yeah, it's a great koan. And she uses contemporary language because she wrote it in response to some Trump stuff anyway, but that's not. So she calls it Miazong vindicates the vagina. From the time of the Buddha and throughout Zen history, women's sexuality, aka the pussy koan, has been one of the most difficult problems for Zen monks and nuns. In the 11th century China, the nun Miaozong, who lived from 1095 to 1170, flashed a Zen monk with her naked spread eagle body, giving quite the pussy shot to the monk Weinan. So interesting to have this language, isn't it? The nun did this in response to the monks lobbying their mutual teacher to have her removed from the monastery for the explicit offense of being female. In Weinan's view, women had no place in the monastery. So this nun, Yazong, hearing the monk's concern, invited him for a Dharma interview. In other words, invited him to Tokusan room. When the monk stepped into her room, he found her buck naked and spread eagle. One of the many puzzled. Women's face is, why is this man against me? Since Zen practitioners understand the essence of human equality, Miazong didn't waste time discussing it. She chose to explore the world of their relative human differences. Politely, she went first in exposing her genitals. Weizan immediately pointed to her exposed pussy and asked, "What kind of place is this?" With great composure, Miazong replied, "This is the place where all Buddha's ancestors enter the world." Possibly contemplating a pussy grab, Weizan asked, "Am I to enter it or not?" Her calm reply, "Horses cross, asses do not." At which she closed her legs, turned her back to him, and declared the Dharma interview was over. Weizan returned to his teacher, tail between his legs no doubt, and reported the whole incident. Anyway, this is recorded. Interesting, an old story. What kind of place is this? This is the place where every human being comes into the world. And so you think I don't belong here? So there are more. Now you want to read your notes. Thanks for bringing up that. comments, questions, reflections that you'd like to share or ask about?
Well, I'm curious, in the koan, can it be, oh, I always forget that. Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
people
get the hot
want to
seat.
enjoy.
Okay. In the koan, it's interesting to me, I just caught it this time reading it. I really liked it. She just was in her, I don't know if power's the right word, matter-of-factness. But it's interesting to me that I believe it was just the two of them when they went in another room. And so she avoided the maybe embarrassment or shaming him in public part of it. Anyway, that's interesting to
Who
me.
knows
that-
what the motivation was? You know,
Right.
the friction was with him. He was the one that called her out, so she said, okay, dude, we'll meet.
We're on.
Yeah, come meet me. So,
Yeah, I really admire
yeah,
that woman.
she gave him the real deal.
Well, and the part that just pops right out, I mean, the whole thing is, where is it, what she said? What was his objection? What does he have against me, or,
Yeah.
I forget what. Yeah, why is this man against me? It's just blatant, doesn't make sense, and she meets him with that, like, doesn't make sense, let's just,
And I love,
see what
I
happens.
really like Grace's comment that she politely went first. He's supposed to be
Yeah.
Isn't that a great line?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, okay, you want to see our differences? We'll see our differences, but what difference does it make? Now, there is an earlier piece that you have in your notes from Rita Gross, who is a wonderful teacher. She died last year, unfortunately, of a stroke, that talks about gender in Buddhist studies. And then the piece I put is called How Clinging to Gender Subverts Enlightenment. And it's a whole thing about if there's no individually existing self, then what does gender mean? And so we don't have to go into it all, but I think it's worth a read. And I gave you some other examples of some questions that came to 3 different Buddhist teachers about, does my transgendered identity interfere with my practice? And then James Ford, who's a pretty respected teacher, another thing that I gave you is his reflections on the sex scandals in centers. That's a whole nother, there's so many
Plenty of that.
directions that we can go about this. But I did want to say something, thank you, without going into the whole thing, because it's way too much. But when James Ford is responding to this stuff, I like the first piece of the section that I gave you, because he says, sex isn't the problem. What we see, and he's talking about some history here of several teachers who are famous because they made trouble. And he says, what we see here are a couple of actual predators. A large number of people with bad boundaries, and an even larger number of people who've been caught up in domestic issues where sex was just a presenting issue. Now these are real issues and they need to be addressed, and I will talk about this, but the problem really is why Zen? And if that why is compelling, how to foster it, and those called to what it has to offer. With that, my first assertion, Zen is worth the trouble. And he goes on to talk about why Zen practice is worth the trouble, even though it means dealing with these troubling issues. Which I think is a much more interesting conversation than vilifying people because they made stupid mistakes. Not because people shouldn't make stupid mistakes. Not because people shouldn't have proper boundaries. Of course they should. He does talk about that. So I'm going to read a little bit more. Zen is a particular school of Buddhism that took shape in early medieval China, bringing elements of Taoism and Confucianism to the mix. All this shaken well, and out of that poured some claims about reality and what that understanding of reality can mean in our lives. And along with that, bringing a basket of practices, Chan, Shikantaza, koan practice, and as well as a tradition of spiritual directors, experts in the practice, who have been said to have seen into the heart of the matter, who serve as guides along the way. I have found the wisdom of Zen life-saving. I have found the disciplines worth a lifetime commitment. I've also found the rhetoric surrounding the teacher overblown. The deep message of Zen's liberation is into our ordinariness. We are never something other than the people existing within the flow and cause and effect. We are angry or greedy or whatever, and wisdom into our boundlessness and the play of the boundlessness, and with the ordinary may mitigate. Wisdom doesn't change who we are in a fundamental way. And this remains true for our teachers as much as for anyone else. So I think we need teachers, but they need to be taken down a peg or two. Sorry. We need Zen teachers in succession who see themselves not as magical inheritors, but as long-time students entrusted with a terrible and beautiful responsibility. And he goes on to talk about it in a very compassionate way. So are there any other things that come to mind right now that are really alive for you around sexuality and practice? Around identity, gender, around anything that came up in your small groups? I'm sure there must have been dear things that showed themselves in the group.
So we started talking about this earlier, you and I, but I thought it was interesting enough, and I was thinking of Roger. What's the film critic's name? Roger Ebert, who was this really respected film critic, beloved by most people as a film critic. But when he saw the film Blue Velvet, which is a very raw and rough film with a lot of
Shadowy elements.
His review of the film, he trashed it completely. And I've been thinking about that for a while, and I thought I had it kind of in a box, but something about this brought it up again, that, well, I'm curious. I think his complaint about the film was that he found that if you're going to ask an actress to get naked on camera and to be humiliated, that it ought to be for a good reason. Because I think that was his complaint. And yet, it was clear that he himself was having this really defensive reaction against that somehow there's something like propriety and impropriety. So I'm not sure if
He was triggered somehow.
He was triggered, which I think that's the purpose of art. A lot of art is to actually trigger you and make you question some things about yourself, that the world is one way or not another.
Our very endeavor this evening.
Pardon me?
Our very endeavor this evening.
And so as I was watching the film with this young man, I was just wondering what the stripping of his clothes, whether that added something, whether he was just entering some kind of performance which made him hide even more, whether we could even tell what's authentic and what's not authentic, whether it served a purpose, whether it was some kind of...
You have your own list of prompts. That's good. Very good. Good questions. I mean, he was asked to do it because the whole series of people who were asked to do that very same thing as they talked about themselves. Because it's about a whole blog about style and clothing and what's underneath.
Okay.
So there was a particular thing behind it.
So going back to Roger Ebert's really abrasive reaction, I mean, I just wonder what... I know there's no answer to that question. There's nothing to be landed on.
But what's your question? When I saw that film, I was opened, and I was like in awe of how much there is to explore, and I was thankful for the film, for exposing all these dark elements, and that the shadowy is just as beautiful as what's in the light, and to see a really thoughtful, introspective film critic just trash it completely as though it was vandalism of some kind made me question things, but I'm not sure It's always, I don't know why it continues to shock me, but it does, when I will teach a class, lead a retreat, do a Dharma talk, write something on a blog, do something, as wholeheartedly and clearly as I can for the good. And someone somewhere will come after me in a vicious way. And it's like, I don't know why I keep being surprised. I mean, 99% of the people don't, but someone is. And so, and I'm not interested in blaming, but I am interested in, gosh, something really got stirred up there. And I don't know what to make of that. That's for them to. But it will always happen. And if you're going to have a powerful communication, some people are going to like it and some people are going to hate it. If the communication is powerful enough.
But it does seem like just because there is that one person out of 100 that to therefore start hiding and concealing the depth of us, that would seem to be a poor choice. That would be an affront to life itself, right? Somehow, like.
Maybe.
But I
wouldn't want to stop teaching because I didn't please everyone.
You know.
I want to pay attention to the feedback I get. Maybe I've missed something. That is a possibility. But if my goal is to please everybody, I'm going to always feel bad. But if my goal is to open people, then I say, well, that's interesting. And that's certainly what I hope to do with these series of classes, because that's our whole job in these classes, with sex and shadow and the unspoken. What is it that we typically don't look at, especially around spirituality, which in spiritual worlds are often even pushed aside as not spiritual, in which maybe even the Dharma gates, they're the most important to pass through. Thanks.
I felt like something that Chris said, that just the process of what he was doing was like, in the slowly stripping was like, that's what became almost more dominant than like actually hearing what he was saying. And I could feel, I'm curious about it. I could feel like it was like my own discomfort with him going through that process. I have a friend who wrote a book on body dysmorphia, and so she was getting people, she was recruiting people to be part of it, and she asked me, and first I said no, and then I was like, well, this is a really good thing, good topic, and then so then I said, I think so, and then I talked to Catherine about it, and she was like, no. So in the end it was no, but what I realized, because my group, there was a lot of people who were talking about what he was saying and how vulnerable he was being and how much strength he had, but more for me it was just some kind of pardon that was recoiling from the process. Like, if he was saying all those things fully clothed, but like,
No.
I'm just noticing that.
That's one of the reasons I showed it, because without letting you know that that was what was going to happen, particularly, and I didn't go into it, it adds a certain kind of,
Yeah.
Because different things will have different impacts. Some of it will be just the body stuff, and all of us have different beliefs, we have different histories, we have different cultural things, and many things that it would speak to those things,
Yeah, it feels like a lot of the Indian culture part is coming forward, and the sort of this is exhibitionism, and it was like all the stuff he was saying, and it was getting lost for me in the process that he was in, and I'm curious about that.
Yeah, and some people might not have thought that that part had any power at all.
Yeah.
Once again, just interesting, a different kind of probe for each person.
Yeah. And I think large part of it was him doing it, thinking about myself doing it, and feeling really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks for that stripping.
So thank you. And there's a lot more that it's really hard to talk about stripping when you're not kind of private. But what I need to strip off right now is how, what Carolyn was saying about, like, I can do that, like I can make myself bare, but I have to feel like I'm really in a safe space. And he said that, and thinking about my parents and how I totally, where are you? Oh, how I totally resonate with that, because that made me feel so weird. And I was thinking, though, also a little bit about what you were saying, and how I think over time I'm getting better at actually having these kinds of conversations with my parents. And I was in the car with my mom this weekend, and it was the first time since I've seen her in a while. I thought they were ignoring me because I went to Washington for the march, and there are all these pictures of me. And Leela, who's a big part of our Sangha, had sweetly, the morning before we left, knitted this purple hat, the pink hat. And I got there the first day, and I was wearing it, and I was feeling Leela, and I was making all these connections with other people on the day of the inauguration, because it was the inauguration day. It's weird how this makes me so nervous to talk about. And I made so many friends with people who were like, oh yeah, okay, so it's the inauguration day, but I see you and you see me, and we start talking, where are you from, and it was this amazing catalyst for connection and spirit and energy, just wearing this hat that Leela had given me. So I'm in the car with my mom Saturday. I'm like, okay. I can talk to her about this stuff. And I was like, Mom, are y'all mad? Because Dad didn't come to town today. She's like, no, he just wanted to play golf. And I was like, okay, so it wasn't this stuff about Washington. And she's like, no, I don't think it was, it's not that you went to Washington, it's that you wore a pussy hat on your head. and I was like, but wait, it really wasn't a pussy hat, it was a kitty cat hat. And I just got into I want to say
She would say it.
What?
She would say it.
Well, she didn't say a pussy hat, actually. I told the story wrong. She's like, you were wearing the P word on your head. And so I was like, but it wasn't, I don't think it really was that. I thought it was just a cat. And I kind of had to backpedal, and she said, but Miss Nancy Sanders saw that on Facebook of you wearing that. And she's like, Martha, you raised Clayton better than that.
Oh. Never could expect that. Yeah.
And so I thought, so you can actually you have to really know your audience. You have to contextualize, and you can't actually do that for people who, you just need to know your audience, and so that everyone's comfortable. However, I did feel like even having this conversation as we're driving down Mopac, it did feel like it was a breakthrough, just to even be talking
To have
about
it.
that. Just to be having it. And I was like, Mom, this is what I didn't want. I didn't want her to be offended by the hat and forget the positive. I want her to know all the positive stuff. I was like, but my friend made it for me, and I made a lot of friends through it. And she's like, you just don't wear that thing on your head. So it was strange, and I'm sorry, I think I might be going on too long, but
But whether or not you agreed, or whether or not you came to a similar understanding, the conversation continued for a while. And she got to express who she was, and you got to express who you were.
And I didn't actually, when she said that, Martha, you raised her better than that, I didn't feel any shame. It just was more of anthropological observation, which is, in the past I would have gotten upset about it, but that day I was like, oh, this is the way they talk.
Right. Of course. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah. But I think and I haven't actually asked you a question, I've more told a long story, and I'm sorry about that. What I'm interested in is, when is it hiding behind a mask to say, actually, I think it was just a cat, it wasn't a pussy? Is that hiding behind a mask, or is that just me?
Was
Yes,
it?
it is.
Okay.
Was it?
And the other thing is, it's not always our job to make everybody comfortable.
Okay, well, that's what I'm wondering, because I really tiptoe. Like, I'm like, okay, if I put her too much out of her comfort zone, she's not gonna love me anymore, which I know is not true, but I,
And to push her relentlessly is adolescent.
Right.
So wisdom and compassion have to go together. You have to be skillful.
okay. I
You
just
don't
don't,
want to be brutal, but you also don't want to be violent to yourself. And it isn't always clear.
that's the tricky part. It's not
Always
clear.
tricky. It's never not tricky.
But the criterion can't be to make everyone always be comfortable.
And you come from a whole family where that's the ethic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
When your friend said you raised her better than that, what she was saying is you raised her as a young woman whose job was to make everyone comfortable.
That's right.
That's what she meant.
This is so helpful, because I think that I was thinking, I'm contextualizing appropriately, but actually I might be hiding behind a mask, and thank you.
It's not even hiding, it's just colluding with the conditioning.
Okay. Damn it.
How is that useful?
No, it's so useful,
I got
it's so
good
useful.
information.
Yeah, but the point is that we actually talked.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. And then I can come to you guys and you can help me
And
understand.
she, and I would add, she continues to feel your willingness to be courageous, even if sometimes you hide, and even if sometimes you collude, but you're still way, way further across the line than she is, with her.
Yeah, it was funny though. I was like, no, but my good friend made it for me, and I made all, you know.
My 86-year-old mother was making them, and wore hers, in a wheelchair, my sister pushing her,
Oh,
She was
in
a
her
sight.
purple jumpsuit.
Yeah. She was a sight to behold.
thank you very much, and I want to hear more about that, of like your.
Well, a lot of people came up to her and said, gosh, you're here, and you can't even, really walk. My sister was pushing her. She said, yeah, you don't want to piss off Grandma.
Do you have pictures?
Yeah, yeah, Mom is not retiring,
Awesome.
kind of person.
Okay, well, thank you. This actually helped me a lot. So thank you.
Hi, Cassie.
Hi.
Welcome.
Just perfect.
We've done okay. Any last minute comments? Oh, Barbara.
Can I say, oh, you don't. Just for a second. The thing that came up for me, which is what is coming up for me a lot these days, is that when I was his age, I could have done that completely unselfconsciously and just been easy breezy. At my age now, it's different.
Yeah, now it's a whole nother thing,
It's a whole different
Aging.
thing.
and the changes in the body
Yeah,
and the comfort.
yeah, yeah, because I have that memory physically of what it used to be. And then the acceptance of how in a sexual situation to be comfortable with how it is now
Right.
is, let's see, my practice.
Yes, I understand that too. Being my age, I was complaining to someone recently about, crepey skin
Oh, I
and
don't
the
know
brown
anything about
spots
crazy skin.
and all this stuff.
Yeah, that.
And she said, well, Flint, you can't have an adolescent body all your life. I said, why not? Only, genetically, I've always been tall and slim, but eventually it gets you. And I think it's really hard, because I haven't struggled with that stuff until the last few years.
And you're 5 years younger than I
I
am.
know, but you still have to deal with it, no matter what it is, you have to deal with it, And those of you that are old enough to know, you walk down the street and you walk in front of a window of a store and you see the reflection, you wonder who that old person is, and you realize it's you. Like, gosh, I don't feel like I look like that.
Yeah.
So, our practice is about deep, profound acceptance and the beauty of how it is now. That we've earned these wrinkles, we've earned these saggy things. And every pain when you have to stand up in the morning, everything else. And if we love each other, or you have someone who's a lover, or who's willing to say, if I really want this one, like this, I don't want you to be somebody else. That's such an amazing gift, because you can see in the other the acceptance that you have a trouble with. And then, because you can see maybe in your partner, like, I like you too. We can roll around on our saggy skin, have a good time. Everything doesn't work exactly the same, but it doesn't matter, you still have a good time. Because it's not just being,
Now they can't wait.
it's being close, you know?
That's right.
The sweetness.
The sweetness.
The sweetness of the acceptance of the whole thing. It'll be interesting to see, you know, in 40 or 50 years, if he gets another 40 or 50 years, what it's like.
Yeah, if he were to go through the same exercise,
Uh-huh.
as it were.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think this body dysmorphia, you know, acceptance of our bodies, acceptance of our gender, acceptance of our preferences, and acceptance of others face to face, body to body, skin to skin, eyeball to eyeball, is an immense challenge and a huge practice. This isn't somewhere to the side of practice. This is the heart of practice. And the issues of intimacy and the call and the longing to be close are so powerful that if people don't have appropriate boundaries, of course bad things happen in practice and people get taken advantage of on both sides, because the longing's on both sides. You know, there are predators who do bad things. There are vulnerable young people who get taken advantage of because they look up to teachers and want to be, not always, you know, but it's a two-handed game. So I think we should continue next time on all this, don't you? There's a lot to this. I'm gonna, and if you haven't taken the time to read John Wellwood's essay that came on the perfect love we seek, the imperfect love we live, it's a masterful description of the relative and absolute in terms of human love. And the summary of that is in the poem I read at Inquiry today. Which I'll read one more time. By Courtney Walsh. She entitles it, Dear Human. Dear human, you got it all wrong. You didn't come here to master unconditional love. That's where you came from. And that's where you'll return. You came here to learn personal love, universal love, messy love, sweaty love, crazy love, broken love, whole love, infused with divinity, lived through the grace of stumbling, demonstrated through the beauty of messing up, often. You didn't come here to be perfect. You already are. You came here to be gorgeously human, flawed and fabulous, and then to rise again into remembering. But unconditional love, stop telling that story. Love, in truth, doesn't need any other adjectives. It doesn't require modifiers. It doesn't require the condition of perfection. It only asks that you show up and do your best, that you stay present and feel fully, that you shine and fly and laugh and cry and hurt and heal and fall and get back up and play and work and live and die as you. It's enough. It's plenty. One deserves a bell. So if for some reason you did not get any of these things, and I also left, including the link to the little video if you want to watch it again. And there are many others in that series that you'll find on YouTube if you're interested. One of the ones that I found also interesting is by a transgendered woman who goes by the name I.O. Little I, or O, you may know her, I don't know, she's super famous. And she talks about body, girl, boy, all this stuff, very interesting. So thank you for your time, I hope this was a useful use of your time.
When's the next,
Huh?
when's the next meeting?
What?
When's the next meeting?
The next meeting? I have no idea. It is